Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on 17 December last year, a young man in Tunisia burned himself to death. This became the trigger that ultimately forced the Tunisian president since 1987, Ben Ali, out of power in January this year. The events in Tunisia spilled over to the whole Arab world, and 1 month later, after massive protests and demonstrations, the Egyptian ruler since 30 years, President Mubarak, had to step down. Through media, including through blogs and Twitter, the world got to know the new force of civilian power in these countries, the young generation of the Arab world. Today, a lot of focus is directed to the current active crisis and military intervention taking place in Libya. But in the shadow of this drama, critical steps are taken in the countries where it all began. The development in these countries will affect us all. This is the European Union's neighborhood. It's Sweden's neighbors. Today, we will learn more about this new generation and hear directly from them about their ambitions and the challenges ahead. The Swedish Institute of International Affairs, in cooperation with the Axel Johnson Foundation and the TV Access, are proud to have invited some of the key actors from these countries to this seminar so that they are able to share their experience with you here today. For their introduction, I will hand over the floor to this afternoon's moderator, Nathalie Besèr, who is a journalist and has for many years been a Middle East correspondent. And with this, I bid you all very welcome, and I hand over the floor to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Anna. Very few had expected this development in the Middle East and North Africa. A public uprising against the regimes all over the region, stemming from the young generation, a generation that was raised with Facebook, Twitter, blogs, and such. So I'm so happy to introduce today two of the most important political players in the revolutions in Tunisia and in Egypt. We have soon Mustafa Al Nagar. He's a bit late, but he will come soon from Egypt, who is now the campaign leader of presidential candidate Mohamed el Baradei, but also a very well-known blogger, and the one who organized the youth activities in the Tahrir Square. So he was really on the spot. To my left, I'm so happy to have Salim Amamou. He's today the Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports in the interim government in Tunisia. And during the Jasmine Revolution, he was one of the bloggers that ignited the protest. And we will hear his stories and also your view a bit about the future, what will happen. And you were actually imprisoned. I mean, you were this important blogger, sort of. You were some, but you were one of the most important. And then you were put in prison. And when you came out, you were this symbol. You were like this star.
Somewhat, but like you said, and I'll always emphasize it. During the time the revolution happened, I was in prison, so I'm certainly not the main actor in the revolution. Actually, what happened is, if I can tell the story. I began fighting against internet censorship in 2009 in Tunisia. I organized a demonstration against internet censorship because I thought if we had in Tunisia a space for free expression, that could be a lever for future democracy, even if we can't take down the government. And to be fair, I never thought the government either will go down as soon as it did. So we tried to organize a demonstration, which in the end, and we got arrested at that time. It was the beginning of 2010. And then we continued fighting internet censorship and in different ways. And in the end of December, there was the uprising since Sidi Bouzid. And there was no actual media working at that time. You know, all the old medias were corrupted by the old regime. So no media talked about it. No television, no radio, no press talked about what was happening in Sidi Bouzid. So since we are interested in freedom of expression over the internet, we started covering what was happening in Sidi Bouzid, which led to like a snowball effect. When all the information got into the internet and into social networks, so people started getting informed through those medias and supporting the protests in Sidi Bouzid by protesting in their own town. By the end of December, there was protests everywhere, including in the capital, Tunis, in support to Sidi Bouzid and for social demands and different social demands, because the first demands that came from Sidi Bouzid were about unemployment mainly and dignity. And when the protests began moving around the country, there were other demands from the protesters. And in the end, all of this led to a common idea, which is asking for the government, for the Ben Ali regime to leave. And this, I think, it was really important, and it was very special about the fact that all of this happened on the internet. The fact that this idea emerged out of a lot of different demands is specific to the internet, I think.
Can I just ask you, why Tunisia? Why did it start in Tunisia? No one could have ever foreseen that. Why Tunisia?
My opinion is it is because of different facts. Among them is the fact that in Tunisia we didn't have working medias, like I said before. All the medias were corrupted. And when I think about it at the beginning, I thought there was we need a space for freedom of expression, and the old medias were difficult to reform since the corruption in old media was internal. You know, the journalists were themselves corrupted. The whole system was corrupted, so that it would take years to reform. But the internet censorship was different. It was a technical censorship, so it was easy to remove. So we focused on this aspect.
And these technical aspects.
Yeah, on asking actually to remove censorship, because it was I think the weakest point of the old regime. So we could have it, right, even if the regime don't get out. But in the end, when the word got out about taking down the government and the protests still were happening everywhere, in January 6, I got arrested. And it was mainly because of anonymous attacks on governmental websites. So
you were suspected to be one of the...
Yeah, I was suspected of being the instigator of those attacks.
And were you?
Not really. I'm not anonymous. I'm Salim Amamou. So, but it's clear that I participated. I reported on what was happening from the beginning, and I encouraged people to participate. So, and those attacks were really important because it demonstrated two things, actually. The first is that there is a new kind of citizenship, I think, at this moment of history. in those attacks, people participated from around the world. The whole world participated in the Tunisian revolution by attacking governmental websites. And the second thing, the foreign press got interested in what was happening in Sidi Bouzid because of those attacks. So they were interested in Anonymous because 2 weeks or 3 weeks before, Anonymous was attacking, was defending WikiLeaks, and then they got interested in Anonymous, and they got interested to Tunisia through Anonymous.
What is Anonymous? Could you please?
Anonymous is a group of people that are anonymous, and they decide, they're mainly not organized, and they decide to take action in political aspects and different things. Sometimes it works, and sometimes not. So they're just a group of people which are anonymous online. And now we're. So when I got out of prison, after 3 days later, I became Secretary of State for Youth and Sports, and now we're building the new Tunisia, and we're mainly the next steps are. So we decided to make a constitutional assembly that will make a new constitution. We dropped the old constitution and we're making a new constitution. We will be making a new constitution. But till then, till the elections, which are fixed for 25 of July, we're reforming the electoral code for those elections. So there is a commission working on that electoral code that will come up with a new electoral code, so we can make constituent assembly elections, and that constituent assembly will work on a new constitution for about 2 years. So those are the steps. Meanwhile, we are trying to be innovative in the ways we could govern Tunisia. So the civil society, and I am pushing for specific things in the society with some friends, actually the same network that worked before for against internet censorship, for the freedom, for the demonstration in Sidi Bouzid.
So it's the same group of friends,
yeah.
sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I have to mention it's an extended group because we have connection into Egypt. Egyptians, for instance, when demonstrated in support to Sidi Bouzid very early, like Tunisians did, and we supported each other at each step. So now what we want for Tunisia is the best standards in governance. So we're pushing, for example, for open governance, which a new type of governance based on decision-making and participation of everybody into decision-making, and not just representation. It means it replaces the fact that elections are made every 5 years, and you get